find it helpful, please turn in it to Luke, the 11th chapter. This is where we're going to spend our time. We've all heard the adage that the sincerest form of flattery is to imitate. If we see somebody that's doing something or behaving in a certain way, I remember this is common in children. You know, we see somebody in the schoolyard that we think is really cool. And so we take on some of their mannerisms and we pretend in some ways to be like them. These are things that we do because we're looking at something and seeing something in them that we really admire. But what about us? I mean, Paul said, "Be imitators of me." Now, I'm not going to say that because if you knew me really, really well, you'd realize that wouldn't be something that would occur to me to say. But what about us? Do we see behaviors in the people in the Scriptures that we admire that we want to imitate? Let's take a look at this text today. In chapter 11, verse 1, it came to pass as Jesus was praying in a certain place that he ceased praying. And when he ceased, that one of his disciples said to him, "Lord, teach us to pray, just like John taught his disciples." So Jesus said to the disciples there, "When you pray, pray this way. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day, each day, our daily bread. Forgive us our sins. We forgive everyone who sins against us and is indebted to us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one." Interestingly, that Luke, in the Greek, that word evil one is there, not just evil in a general sense. I don't know why Luke chose to do that, but that's what he did. Now, the first thing, and this has been my question every time I come to this text as I've been a believer, I look at it and I say, why does Jesus need to teach us about something that seems so obvious? Well, I think he's giving us a window into what the real world is like. And he's giving us a window into who we are. He's teaching, at least as I take it, he's teaching me how much I love myself. That there's a part of me that just looks at Rip and looks in the mirror, and that becomes my universe to some degree. And everything else orbits around that. That's one of the things it teaches me. But it also teaches me something else about what it is to walk in this world as a believer and to have this activity that just seems so natural to us. I hope it seems natural to everybody. This idea that wherever we are, whatever we're doing, whatever the circumstances of our life, that we can speak with God in that moment, and he's ready and willing to listen to us in that moment. We take that so for granted, and I don't know that that's a bad thing. I know that any good parent wants their children to some degree to take them for granted. I want Jackson to just take it for granted that I care about him. I don't want him to wonder. I don't want him to have to make phone calls and text me every day and say, "Dad, do you care about me today?" Or "Has something changed since yesterday?" Why would we think God is any different than that? Right? I mean, he wants us to just accept the fact that he cares about what's going on in our lives. And the connectivity that we have with him, the means by which we relate to him, these things that do concern us, is prayer. But we have so, I don't know what word to even put to it, mismanaged this idea of what it is to pray throughout the centuries of the church, until I wonder if we're not so damaged that it becomes very difficult for us to accept prayer for what it is. Couple of things. It's been popular in the church for 30 years. I've been a Christian for 35 plus years. And when I first became a believer, I remember I was on the road with the band within just a couple of months. And of course, you're going to all these conferences and seeing big Christian luminaries. You know, Billy Graham's at this one, and somebody else, Tony Campolo's at this one. I'm just kind of, I don't know any other than Billy Graham. I don't know any of these people anyway. But still, I'm recognizing these people are luminaries in the Christian world. And inevitably, at some of these conferences, the idea of prayer would come up. Well, we would go to these conferences and there would be a teaching in one of the tents. You know, they separate out for classes. You got the 40,000 people like at the Creation Festival, 70,000, who come for the big night. But then during the day, the 3 days of the event, there are all these little tents all around where you might have Tony Campolo talking about social justice or whoever. And so we would go to these things because we got all day. We're only going to play for an hour and a half that night. We got a whole day to kill. Can't go anywhere. Might as well go to one of these teachings. So we would go in one. And I remember the first one I went into, not the very first one, but one of the first ones as I attended, it was on how to pray. And it was dealing with what's known today and was known then as warfare praying. And I thought, well, okay, let me come in there and learn about warfare praying. You know, at 35 years now walking with Jesus, I am convinced that is the biggest waste of time that any teaching could be. If a 6-year-old gets on their knees or does whatever they do when they know Jesus and they come to the place where they say, Lord, please watch out for my mommy and daddy. They are doing warfare. If you and I come to any moment in the day, I don't care when it is, I don't know what you all do, I don't know what your daily regimen is with regard to prayer and how you orchestrate that. It doesn't matter to me. That's between you and the Lord. The minute you say to God His name and you begin to speak with Him, you're at war. Just take that and put it in your pocket and carry it with you for the rest of your life. That's just how it is. Now, if you think I'm wrong about that, think to yourself, what happens when you start to pray, or I start to pray? What happens to us when we start to pray about things that concern us? I can tell you what happens to me. Did I get enough lumber for my job this morning?
Yeah.
Did I feed the dogs? Did I remember to lock my truck last night? I mean, everything that is immediate just floods in. Do you think that's an accident? It's not an accident. You and I are at war. When we say the name of the Lord and begin to speak with Him as though He is listening, and He is, we're at war. Think about it like this. Last night, Becky and I have this new habit. It's a great habit. I'm really digging it. On Friday and Saturday night, we have a movie night. And so I have a bowl. We each have these big silver bowls. I guess they probably, I don't know, it's that big around, it's about that deep. Mine is filled right to the top with popcorn. Hers is less. But I fill that sucker up with popcorn and we watch a movie every Friday and Saturday. Unless I've just got so much schoolwork or something happens, where we can't do that. So we're sitting there watching this movie last night. It's a silly movie. But I'm just in a grip. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about Jackson. I'm not thinking about any of you. I'm just in a grip with this silly movie. Now, not one time during that movie did I get distracted about anything going on in this world. Syria didn't bother me at all. Never even occurred to me. Isn't it interesting that the one thing that we do where we reach out to God, the second we start, everything floods in. That is not an accident. That is not an accident. Now, Jesus is teaching us something here as, I guess you could look at this as a template. To some degree, it is. He's not giving us words, but what this teaches me, when I look at this, I think this is way past where I am as a believer. This is above me here. My grade as a Christian has not reached this yet. I'm still going there. I am so thankful that the Bible contains Romans chapter 7. That I can read that and be reminded that it was hard for Paul too. This walking with Jesus in this world where everything around us looks so different than what we're reading about, what we just sang about, praising Him every day. Do you do that? Do we walk through this world all day long just praising the Lord all the time? I got to be honest and say no. No, I don't do that. We sing about it though, right? There's something going on. There's something going on between us and the Lord and this world. And I'm telling you, Every time we come to the place where we invoke His name, we've entered warfare. Just like that. Even if we're just thanking God for the food, something has happened. Now, there are all kinds of pitfalls here. And if you go to Matthew chapter 6 and read the parallel passage, which I would encourage you to do, there are pitfalls in all of this, and they're all hinging on this warfare. First one, we want to be seen. Now, I go to a lot of these Piedmont conferences where the room's filled with pastors. And they will inevitably have a kind of an altar call for us, which is always uncomfortable for me. But who doesn't want to be seen to be the first one up front when they say, if you've got a prayer concern, come up front? How do you think any of us feel about that? Well, I want to come out of my shoes to go forward just so I'll be seen. Coming forward, that is so wrong. But that's how we are. So Jesus warned in Matthew, in this parallel passage, about being seen to be praying. I remember in Pennsylvania, we started that church, and we were at an elders meeting, and one of the elders was really angry when we got there. He felt like, I want this church, this is exactly what he said, I want this church to be known as a praying church. Now, how do you argue with that? Who's going to say, no, I don't think so. I don't think that's a good idea at all. Nobody's going to do that, right? Everybody wants to be part of that same thought process. And he wanted to do this. He said, I want us, after the service, to get into groups and pray for each other. So we did. We instituted that program. Well, after 2 Sundays, we had another elders meeting. And, stupid me, I just said, I don't think this is a good idea. And that's how I am. I do that sort of stupid thing a lot. I don't think this is a good idea at all. And of course, immediately, what's the matter with Rip? Doesn't he want us to be praying as a church or be singing? I said, what do you think a visitor who comes in here and maybe they aren't even believers, and they got to sit in this circle now with these other people that they don't really know and be in this uncomfortable situation? What do you think that message is to them? Wanting to be seen to be spiritual is one of the traps that we fall into. Anything that calls attention to us as a praying person is a place where we're going to be doing battle in that. Anything. Look, public and private prayer is just part of the believer's life. It was part of the believer's life in the early church. You see it in Acts. Go through the book of Acts and see all the times when they were praying. Acts 4, Acts 12, Acts 13. They're all praying all the time. So this is just part of it. But Jesus warned us about stuff. He said, look, don't get involved like the pagans do in some kind of vain repetition. You ever been in a prayer time with somebody and they're just, look, I don't want to make anybody feel bad, but look, there's a point where I have to take this stuff seriously. And they just say the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over, like over and over. And I think to myself, what's up with that? Do you think that God didn't hear you the first 6 times? I mean, what's going on? Why does Jesus warn about that? Got to be very careful with this one. He warns about it because there's a quality there that says something about the person, again, in which they want to be seen. Look at how powerfully this person is praying. Do you think there's any difference? Do we think there's any difference between the little 6-year-old kid who says, because their parents are on an airplane that week, watch over mom and dad, and somebody who knows how to pray and it sounds like they're reading from the Psalms in King James English? Do you think there's any difference at all in that? There's not. We're coming to God as the sovereign king, maker, and all that stuff that lifts him so far beyond who we are. But we're also coming to God as a father. Don't ever forget that. We're coming to God as a priest. The Jewish tradition, all of the priesthood and all that happened through the Old Testament, right up to the point of the documents of the New Testament here, the 4 Gospels, that priesthood was there for a reason, because the people didn't feel like they could approach God at all. But let me tell you, if you come in this congregational setting, and I get up here and I tell you, today I'm going to teach you to pray. You need to just run for the door as quickly as you possibly can get out of here. Because something's happened to me that's not good. Yeah, something I've been hit in the head, or I ate something weird when I left the house, or something's happened. My mind is not connected at all to the Spirit of God if I say something like that. Nobody has a corner on God's attention. I don't care who they are. Don't look at me as though I've got a corner on God's attention any more than any of you. If you know Jesus, you've got His full attention when you talk to Him. You don't need me for that. We love categories, and we love to create rules, and we love to set things forward and say, this is the way it ought to be. There are books. Go to a Christian bookstore, and I guarantee you get to the devotional section, and you will find a half dozen books that teach you and me how we are to pray. Please don't buy those books. Because if you do, what will happen is you and I will look in the book, read it, and then we'll feel as though we've got to adopt that and be like that. Please, the best thing you can do and I can do if we want to know what it is to pray properly is just start doing it. Just speak with God as though He is there. He is. And He cares about what you have to say and what I have to say. Avoid anything that strips us of the simple conversation with God. Anything, whatever it is, if something has intruded into your life or mine that strips away that simple conversation with God, get rid of it. It's just going to be in the way. Anything that places the quality of prayer above the childlike relationship you and I have with Him. I remember once going to somebody's house, and this is very typical. I will say to them, which is my habit, is there anything in your life today that we could pray about? And inevitably somebody says yes. And so one day we were there and sitting on the porch, and I prayed, and as soon as I got done, the guy says, boy, I wish I could pray like that. And I'm thinking, please don't say that. I didn't say that to them because I would have offended them, but don't think, why would we think like that? Why do we think that the words and the syntax and the beauty of the language has anything to do with how God is listening? Do we correct children when they really want to get our attention about something important? Do we stop them and say, you didn't get the verb number right there in that sentence. Let's try that again. We don't do that. We listen to them because it's important to them. God listens to us because it's important to us. Anything that you and I will see in prayer in its form that makes it better is an incantation. You better get rid of it. Just think about a pagan incantation. Okay, I got 4 chicken feet toenails, and I got the eyebrow of the frog, and I got 2 ounces of hemlock root, and I got the ginseng, but I don't know how long to cut the root off here. I hope I get it right. If I don't, then this wart won't go away. That's an incantation. God doesn't ask that of us, ever. Ever. Anything that places God's answer to prayer in one person's hands. I don't mind praying for anybody. I don't. And if somebody asks me, Rip, will you pray about X? I will do it. But please don't look at me as though I can do something you cannot. I can't. God listens to you the same way He listens to me. And anything in somebody else's experience in prayer that doesn't match what we know, their experience may not be yours or mine. Jesus has given us the template. That's all we need to know. That's the end of it. The reason Jesus has to teach this is because if He doesn't say something about this, then the only guide we have is experience. And anybody's experience is going to be different. Toothpaste tastes different to me than it tastes to you, even if we squeeze it from the same tube. So everybody's experience in prayer is going to be different, Jesus had to do this because he knew that if we didn't have something that would tell us, just in the basic way of a template, what prayer should be, we would wind up in a sea of experiences where nobody knows what to do. So, how you pray, how I pray, doesn't make any difference at all. The fact is that you do it at all, or I do it. That's all that matters. And I'm hoping that everybody in this room speaks with God on a regular basis. I hope so. This is what we see in the world. Prayers being offered to unseen powers that people feel like are out of their control, and they work so hard to get it all just right. God doesn't ask us to get it just right. He wants to bless his children just like any good father or mother would want to bless their children. Don't let anybody strip you of that privilege. You know why? Look at what it cost for us to have it. The only reason the veil of the temple's torn from top to bottom is Jesus paid the price so that you and I could have that privilege of coming to him whenever we want, and we don't have to get it right. All we have to do is come. I don't know where everybody is today, but if I've said anything about